Okay, Chelsea, so we're going to start out with a broad question here. What brought you to the field of dietetics?
Oof. Some of this I don't even think I've shared with you, so we're gonna definitely get
I
into
want to
all.
hear it all.
Yes. So my relationship with food and nutrition started as a young girl. I was a little bit different than my sisters, built differently. I hit puberty at age like 10, 11, so developed much more quickly than anybody else in my class or grade. Um, and that was a big shock to me,
Hmm.
be the only person who looked different. All I really wanted to do was fit in and fit in with my peers. So that was very difficult on me. It took, as the couple of years went on, I noticed my body continued to start to change and it distressed me. So I ended up going to my parents and telling them as an 11-year-old that I wanted to lose weight. And they said, okay. And that's kind of when I started my first restriction and excessive exercise. And that went on for months and months until it was deemed too far, that I had lost too much weight. And then that's when my parents started bringing me to doctors. I had seen a dietitian at that point. I was in therapy, and I really just didn't want to hear it. I was doing whatever it took so I could fit in and feel like I was close with my peers, and I wasn't ready to make that change. Within the next few years, as we know, when we see with dieting, you end up binging and regaining a lot of the weight that you originally lost. So as I
Hmm.
turned 13, 14 years old, I kind of went the opposite direction and started binging. And that went on for a while. But because my weight had been restored, I don't think my parents were paying all that much attention or all that concerned at
Hmm.
that point, right? And then at age 15, and I don't think I shared this with you, but they ended up sending me to like a weight loss camp. It
Wow.
was in the Pocono Trail Valleys. So I was there for a summer. They told me they wanted me to learn how to eat right. And I don't fault them for any of this. They were doing the
Hmm.
best they could with the information they had at that time. But again, that just had me working out every day, 6 days a week, and restricted eating. When I finally came back home, it was the same behaviors. It really had done nothing to heal what was going on with me. As I got into my teen years, 16, 17, 18, food and body became a little bit less of a priority for me. I was interested in being with friends and talking to boys and going out for social events. So that was actually the first time where there was kind of a bit of healing. My
Hmm.
weight stabilized and my eating had really stabilized during that period. But as I decided I wanted to go into college, I actually originally started a nursing school.
Okay.
It was incredibly stressful, and that's what actually drove me to my first passion, which was food and nutrition. Through this whole time, I was actually really passionate about learning what goes into our bodies and what fuels our bodies. So that led me down to the path of nutrition. If I'm blabbing at all and losing track of the focus, just stop me and let me know. Um, but so this is what got me into dietetics, was originally having disordered eating. I thought I was healed from my teen years up until my late 20s. Oh, I was fine. I was fine. I wasn't as thin as I was, so didn't have a problem, is what I told myself. It
Hmm.
wasn't until I discovered intuitive eating I actually realized, oh, wait, I have never actually been healed. It's just manifested in different ways.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. And oh, I think that's a like how you put that bow on the end, like it's just manifested in different ways. There's so many different ways that diet culture can kind of dig its nails in, whether it's the restricting, whether it's the binging, whether it's the body check. I mean, there's just so many different ways. So now you were already practicing. Were you already practicing as a dietitian when you found intuitive eating, or were you a student studying to become a dietitian at that
Yeah.
time?
So I was already a dietitian.
Okay.
So during my schooling, I was not introduced to intuitive eating. I
Same.
never heard it. I think I had one speaker who briefly mentioned Haze once.
Yes.
Majority of my schooling was clinical weight loss counseling.
Yeah.
I ended up doing my internship in clinical. So I was kind of like, you know what, this is what I have most experience with. This is what I'm comfortable with. It's not really where I resonate. And there were times in my life where I knew I really wanted to work with more of the body image and mental health and eating based on my own history. That was really what I was passionate about. But I had not seen that offered in our career during the time I was becoming a dietitian. So I did clinical work. I worked in the hospital, I worked in a nursing home, and then I worked for the VA for a period of time. Luckily, I never had to really work with the intentional weight loss piece because
Hmm.
I kind of that never really resonated with me. So I was glad that I really didn't have I'd firsthand experience it didn't work. So it didn't really
Yes.
resonate with me. But I worked in helping people kind of heal and oncology, cardiac, rehab.
Yeah.
And I did that for close to 7 years until I finally decided to make the leap from clinical to intuitive eating.
Yes, which we're going to talk about that
Yeah.
pivotal video that you've shared with me that you saw that
Yes.
introduced you. But I want to highlight real quick because I think there's such a misconception with dietitians that like you have to be working in intuitive eating with like outpatient or counseling to really uphold the principles. But so many young dietitians or nutrition students or interns that come to find food freedom, they're like, I don't want to accept a clinical job or like, you know, I only want to do intuitive eating counseling. And I totally understand that, especially if that's where the passion is. But I think there's such it's really difficult and it takes a really specific skill set to be able to bring the intuitive eating health at every size language to that clinical space, and it allows you to like practice that because when we really think about intuitive eating, it's like intuitive living, right? It blends into every aspect. So I always like to encourage, like, if any dietitians or dietetic students are listening to this, you can get roles that, like you said, yours weren't even really intentionally weight loss based. They were more that medical nutrition therapy. And that's another misconception too, that dietitians that are in the intuitive eating space, oh, well, you don't do medical nutrition therapy. And it's like, no, we do. We're dietitians, we're registered dietitians, right? We are classically trained. We took the same board test and everything. The difference is we don't have the guilt and shame attached to the food and the body image. And we are not prescribing intentional weight loss as a air quote fix or cure. So I think your clinical experience, I think, is a beautiful thing because like you just shared with me right before we got on air, you were just, seated with a client who was diagnosed with cancer. And you have that ability to not only talk about the medical nutrition therapy, but blend in the intuitive eating and how that affects their relationship with their body and food. And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to do both. Um, so I wanted to highlight that.
Absolutely. I am so I wish I'd started intuitive eating earlier, but I also am so thankful for especially the hospital experience that I
Hmm.
gained because now I get to kind of share with clients like we talked about the one diagnosed with cancer. I've seen both ends. I've
Hmm.
seen the before and I've seen the acute care piece in the end. And I've worked with hospice end of life. I've gone through the life stages and done nutrition at each phase in life. And I wouldn't have gotten that experience had I originally gone into intuitive eating.
That's awesome. That's incredible. Okay, so talk to us. I was going to ask, were you always a weight inclusive provider? So we know that, where you kind of started and you weren't introduced to intuitive eating. So tell our listeners, how were you exposed to intuitive eating? And then once you were exposed, like what happened from like the door opened and what happened from there?
Right. So picture it. It it's 2021, 2020. The pandemic is going on. I
Yes.
am doom scrolling on TikTok as one does.
Yes. Still
And
do. I still do.
and I came across a video that you had made about eating to a point of feeling physically unpleasant, talking about eating pizza, and you described yourself as a registered dietitian. And I'll never forget this, and I shared it with you, and I'll share it with our listeners too. But I remember tearing up, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Like I experienced this. And for a registered dietitian to come out and talk openly about their own dis slightly
Hmm.
past disordered relationship with food was something I'd never heard of. Even though I knew going throughout school, going throughout my internship, I knew the girls around me were struggling, but it was never something that we openly talked about. And just to see you openly talk about it and then describe intuitive eating and healing relationship with food and body, I was like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. And that was 2021. And then I think I'd commented on a lot of your stuff and like sent you messages over the years, but I still had some other goals I needed to get accomplished. I knew I was going to do that, but I had to go up on the shelf for a moment. I was like, I'm living alone in Florida. I need to pay my bills. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this huge jump right now because I don't have anybody else to support myself. I had also been dabbling in the idea of getting my master's degree. So I ultimately had decided to start my master's degree at that point. And knowing I was going in intuitive eating, I said every research project, every paper I write, I'm like, I'm doing intuitive eating research and I told my professors, I'm like, this is what I want to do. So I want to gain as much knowledge during this process as I can. So that's kind of how I spent my 2022 up until end of 2023. And then once that was done, I knew that this was going to be on the horizon. I'd looked for a few jobs here and there and hadn't really seen anything come up, kind of put it on the shelf again. And then you had posted that December that you were hiring, and I was still in school. And I was like, I don't know. I don't have the experience. I kind of went back and forth. I was like, maybe another time. And then this past year, you were hiring again. And that's when, I said, you know what? Even if she doesn't acknowledge me, I'm like, I'm just gonna cast a line and see if I get anything. Just tell my truth and tell my passion, and that's all I can do.
Yes. And now you're sitting here on the Find Food Freedom podcast. It
I
was meant to be.
Yes.
It was meant to be. And I think it's, you know, there's, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dietitians, and I think when it's so evident, like the passion that you hold for intuitive eating, and that can't be taught. Like I've talked with many intuitive eating dietitians, some that are certified intuitive eating counselors, and sure, it's their career, but the passion that you hold for it. And I think a lot of that is because, like you shared with us, your personal story, when you have such a close personal tie of something that really helped you heal, it it exudes from you. You can just tell as you speak and when you talk to clients. So it's such a beautiful gift that you share with us, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Of course. So I would love to hear, you had kind of said when you had heard about intuitive eating, then you're like, oh, I thought I was healed, but I
Okay.
was not. That was pseudo healing. So once you really immersed yourself into intuitive eating, how did that transform your relationship with food or body? Anything you want to share with us?
I will say I tripped, I stumbled, I fell, I scraped a few knees, I got back up, went the opposite way,
Yeah. Hell yeah,
opposite
we all
way again,
do.
panicked, all of it, all of it.
Hmm.
It took
Well,
me,
I love that you're sharing that, and feel free, like, I'm going to hone in even a more specific
yeah,
question. Let's talk about the expectations of starting intuitive eating. I think people think it's like, oh, food freedom, like I'm going to eat whatever I want. It's going to be great. And no, fuck no. It's so
no,
hard. It's so
so hard.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah, it is so hard. So I definitely do. I do, and I explain that to. I don't always tell that personal story, but I do
Hmm.
explain to clients like this is going to be one of the hardest things that you're ever going to do, but it's also going to be one of the most rewarding things you're ever going to do.
Yes.
There's no guilt and shame. If you come back to me next week and tell me, hey, I stepped on the scale, I started a diet a few days, I am not going to judge you.
Hmm.
It's all part of your journey. It's all part of your story. And
Hmm.
sometimes maybe that one last time of accidentally tripping and going back into diet culture is that last straw that you need to show you that this doesn't work.
Yes. 1000%. I love that. And I think it's like when we're looking at dieting, like it is the majority of clients that we work with at Find Food Freedom have dieted for, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, where it's like people will read the intuitive eating book and be like, why can't I do this? Like, and it's like your entire life or however many years you've lived with your identity and your purpose and your mission of having a smaller body. Sure, you can logically know, I want to switch that and I want to change that, but it is so baked into our belief systems that it is so difficult. So I love that you level set that expectation with clients and just tell it how it is of like, you're probably going to trip up. You're probably going to move. And when we say backwards, it's because people think of that like linear, you know, success, but really it's just jumbled and messy and beautiful all in the same.
Yeah.
So, okay, so sorry, I took you down a tangent. So we started intuitive eating. How has it transformed your relationship with food and body throughout the
Oh
years?
my gosh. I definitely have more respect and appreciation for food and body than I ever have in my entire 30 plus years of life. It has truly changed my life, and I can eat without worrying. And that's
Hmm.
been huge for me, is to not worry, what is this going to do to my body? What is this going to do to my body? To be
Hmm.
able to just eat and be present in the moment with my family. And especially in the times when I was in the depth of my most disorder, the relationships that took a turn for the worst. I mean, I was moody, angry, rude, just not a pleasant person to be around. So
Hangry,
really,
right?
very angry, yes. So just being able to be present in the moment, especially now. I just moved back home for our listeners. I lived in Massachusetts till I was 25, moved home for moved to Florida for 8 years, and last week I just moved back home to Massachusetts so I could be closer to my nieces and nephews and my family and just be present with them for the first time in my life,
That's
which intuitive eating
incredible.
has given me. Yes, thank you.
That is so awesome. And to think about being closer to nieces and nephews and the impact that's going to have on their relationship with food and body too.
Yes. Definitely looking forward to showing them what life can look like,
That's awesome.
spoiling them.
Yes, and spoiling them, of
Yeah.
course, as the auntie. I mean, that's the best part. Some of my girlfriends, we call all my like close girlfriends like aunts to my girls, and it's one of my favorite relationships to see. Like, because I don't have a sister, which I always wanted, so that's why I'm like so envious of my girls that they have each other, because that's what I always wanted. But seeing my girlfriends, as their aunts and the love that aunts give their nieces and nephews, it is amazing. So that is incredible that you're going to be closer to them and just knowing the impact that that'll have on their lives too.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so I want to hear, Chelsea, about now that you're working in the one-on-one virtual counseling space that's very different than the clinical space. Very, very different. And you get to really follow along with your clients' journeys longer and see them multiple times. It's not just that quick in and out,
Mhm.
getting discharged from a surgery, depending on where you were at in your clinical time. So, what is your favorite part about counseling clients one-on-one?
My favorite part is the connection,
Hmm.
the human connection. And, some of us have had very similar lived experiences, and to be able to connect on a level with your clients and empathize with them, that has been one of my favorite parts. Also, and of course, the revelations they come to.
Hmm.
They come back and tell me, oh, XYZ happened and completely changed. Something clicked.
Yes.
So that moment of whatever I'd been talking about clicked for them.
Yes.
That is my other favorite part of counseling one-on-one clients.
Yes. The light bulb moments when it's
Yes.
like you can just see it changing. And it's because you can tell somebody something, but until they really experience it, right?
Mhm.
It's different. And I love that you bring up the connection and the empathy. And I think of, and I'm sure you have examples too personally, but like I think about the medical professionals that I go to, whether it's OB, endocrine, PCP, PT, like all of these appointments I've gone to. And every time I just like reflect back to like our team and all of you providers, and I'm like, nobody gives better care than our team. Because like We show up on time. We listen. We don't, it's like the TikTok thing.
Yeah.
We
I
listen and we don't judge, right? That's what I was like, as I was saying it, I was
Yes.
like, this is literally the trend. Um, but it's like, because the amount of times I get dismissed, or they're not even listening to me, or like they're running 40 minutes late, they're rushing and they're like, "Da-da-da-da-da. Okay, good, but here's your script by." And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I couldn't agree more. It's that connection, it's that empathy, it's the listening and building rapport and like actually caring about our clients that I
Mm.
think is just, it creates that safe space for so much change and belief system shifting and that ability to heal those relationships with food and body because it is a safe space where there's so much respect there for the client.
And so many of them, we might be the only person they have to talk to about this.
Hmm.
So that's meaningful to me to know that I'm their safe space to have these conversations with.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So as we wrap today's episode, we talked about a lot of different things, but if listeners forget everything, because we did say a lot, what is one thing you would want them to walk away remembering, believing? It could be a mantra, it could be a quote, it could be something that's has really been like a theme in your counseling sessions recently. What is one thing you want them to walk away with today?
I would say it is never too late. It is never too late to try something new. You're not too old to make a change. It is never too late.
I love that. And that could apply to anything,
Mhm.
truly. I always say our eldest client who has since passed, but he was 79 years old and we were working through intuitive eating. And I was like, that's incredible.
Right?
Incredible.
It is never
Um,
too late.
it's never too late. And I've gotten more and more of these TikToks lately of like probably people around our same age, like mid 30s, mid 40s, like going to like adult tumbling classes or like,
Yes.
and I'm like, I need to do this. Like, I might break my back, but like, why do I have that belief in my head that like it's too late for me to do things?
No, it's not. I know
So
I've looked
I
at that too.
needed to hear that today.
Adult ballet, adult soccer.
Yes.
I loved
So
soccer as a kid. I've thought
good.
about getting back into that. But yeah.
Yes, we have a lot of adult leagues around here. Well, you just
No,
moved, so
I
you have
just
a lot going
moved.
on.
Yeah.
But once you get settled, but I love that. It's never too late. And I think that's such a great reminder. It's never too late to question our belief systems, to choose another route. And it's definitely never too late to walk away from dieting.
Yep.
So thank you for that reminder because I also needed that today. And we will include in the show notes below the link for people to make an appointment with you and get their benefits checked. And just thank you for being here with us today, Chelsea.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
Mhm.